Points are everything in F1, as teams and drivers have forever strived to collect more of them, taking the glory, the prize money, sponsorships. So when a new initiative is in the air that would change the scoring board from awarding points to the top 10 to expanding to the top 12, the first question that comes in mind, is it a good idea? The revamp doesn't appear to be anything drastic, as points would be awarded the same way to the top 7 and would only change beyond that position. The current point structure for the main race has been in place since 2010, with sprint races introduced in 2021, going from granting points to the top 3 to awarding them to the top 8 since 2022. And effective 2019, the driver setting the fastest time in the race gets 1 bonus point, that is if he finishes in the top 10. But how did F1 get into this exact point system in the first place? For various decades leading up to 1990, not all races counted towards the championship, which meant that the driver with the maximum points collected in the season sometimes didn't win the title, as it was the case in 1988, for example. Between 1991 and 2002, it was the top 6 who received points, with the winner claiming 10 points. From 2003 till 2009, points were awarded to the top 8, but notice that this was only a slight expansion of the previous regime rather than a complete revamp of the system, unlike the change in 2010, according to which the Grand Prix winner had an all-time high 7-point lead ahead of the runner-up instead of the previous 2-point advantage. The expansion to the top 12 would be a similar change to when F1 went from granting points to the top 6 to the top 8. So the subsequent question is, would this new system change anything? In the pursuit of answering this question, I drew up an Excel sheet that would no doubt bring shame to the operation at Williams, and I recalculated each driver's points within the ground effect era. Here's what I found. Remember the epic Mercedes-Ferrari battle for the mighty second place in the constructors, and how Mercedes triumphed at the end? Well, with the revised system, the two teams would have ended level on points, and since most race wins, and as a matter of fact the only non-Red Bull win goes to Ferrari, thanks to the smooth operator himself, Ferrari would have taken the runner-up trophy, if there's even such a thing. AlphaTauri's late season rise would have also been rewarded, as the team could have finished ahead of Williams by 2 points. On top of that, Alonso would have beaten Leclerc, and Zhou would have been ahead of Ricciardo, level on points with Hülkenberg. In 2022, Aston Martin would have swapped position with Alfa Romeo and AlphaTauri with HAAS. This is because Vettel and Stroll both would have moved up the ladder, while Mick Schumacher would have fallen behind. But what about this season? RB would be ahead of HAAS by only 1 point, and Williams would be mighty close to Alpine. Stroll falling behind Hülkenberg, Magnussen beating Ocon would all be the case if the new scoring system were in place today. And so the key takeaway is that although the change doesn't seem to be all that radical, to say that awarding points to the top 12 would achieve nothing underestimates the potential impact of this initiative. Yes, we should think long term, avoiding to only see through the lens of the current power structure. However, there are plenty of reasons that warrant an evolution of point distribution. Cars are far more reliable today than they were even a decade ago, and this is a trend that will likely continue in the future. Ignoring half of the grid wouldn't encourage the midfield to keep developing in the latter half of the season. Just look at last year's AlphaTauri. They were consistently faster than Williams or Brother Sargent, but they still finished behind given the field saturation at the front. And this is what it boils down to. Average race position is currently inferior to points, thus has a weaker correlation to championship results than it should have. If someone gets lucky one day and scores a few points but otherwise finishes 17th to 20th, he will end up higher than a driver who delivers consistent 11th to 12th place finishes. So are we rewarding the better driver then? Martin Brundle's comments come into mind here. Points must be hard-won and treasured, valued, not some kind of lucky dip where everyone wins a prize. While I agree with the sentiment, I think it applies the opposite way Mr. Brundle intended. I too think that points must be hard-won and valued, and precisely for that reason, your championship status shouldn't be dependent on a lucky dip, to quote the man himself, but should be granted on merit that is built on consistent high performance, which is what point expansions would encourage in my opinion. If a team happened to bring in a significant development package that beats others in the same strength tier, they should end up higher in the championship than the rest. Not to mention that there would be more at stake for the slower half of the grid, which would hopefully discourage certain individuals from driving as if there were no tomorrow.
There is no tomorrow!
Giving the latter half of the pack a proper battlefield could also attract sponsors even more. At least that is what smaller teams are hoping for. Important to note that the FIA would also benefit from this change, since on top of a base entry fee, teams have to pay extra cash to participate in each season. And this amount is calculated based on how many points the team acquired the season prior. Simply put, the expansion of scoring positions would result in a surge of points, which means more money paid to the FIA. The change could benefit stronger teams as well because A, you never know where you'll end up in future seasons, and B, if you have an incident or a reliability issue mid-race that doesn't butcher your chances completely, you only need to recover to 12th to score a point. When looking into other FIA-governed racing categories, it is usually the top 10 that are rewarded by points, with the exception of ERC, given that the range of participation is much wider there, and at Le Mans, where everyone who finishes beyond the top 10 receives a point. Having said that, F1 could be the leading model with whatever change the F1 Commission agrees on, and I would imagine that upon its success, these changes will be introduced in other series under the umbrella of the FIA. But there are plenty of questions that remain, as the idea is just an initial draft, and I believe F1 is working on a framework that can function on a long term, and thus might introduce changes beyond the expansion of point scoring positions. Should pole positions translate to points like it does in Formula E and junior categories? Is the 7-point gap between the Grand Prix winner and the runner-up too excessive? How would points be granted if only a certain proportion of the race is completed from now on? Some even say points should be awarded to all drivers who finished the race, and although Stefano Domenicali rejected this idea, this poses an important question. Is there a level of achievement that should not be awarded beyond in a sport where power dynamics are forever changing? And these are the questions that I would like to leave you with today in hopes that you share your opinion, as I'm keen to learn what you think on the topic. By the way, if you happen to be interested in a certain Alex Albon's career journey, click here to watch.